This is On Assignment.
VOA News. VOA News.
Hi everyone, welcome to On Assignment. As you can see, we're coming at you from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Behind us is the White House. I'm Imran Siddiqui.
And I'm Alex Villarreal. There will be no moving trucks here anytime soon. President Obama has won another 4 years in this White House, but it was not without a fight from Republican challenger Mitt Romney. The mood out here today is celebratory. We just saw a biker ride by. He was shouting out, 4 more years, we did it. But of course, there's still a large portion of the population disappointed by this outcome.
And that's exactly what we'll be talking about today with VOA political reporters in the show.
We're also going to take a look at how this re-election of President Obama is going to affect the global economy.
The race is over. President Obama is back in the White House. Let's head back to the studio and see what we got going for you today.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go. And we're back in Studio 55, and Alex, it's much warmer here than what was outside.
It is much warmer than outside. We are joined here by VOA's national correspondent Jim Malone, who is going to tell us all about the results of this big U.S. election.
It seems like we're back to square one because the Republicans control the House and the Democrats controlling the Senate.
Right.
How do you think President Obama will maneuver from now on?
Well, you know, both parties were waiting for the outcome of the election, and I think they both were hoping for a different result. Well, we've got the status quo. They're going to have to live with each other, and they have some really big issues to address in terms of our budgetary needs, tax policy, and it has to be done in a matter of weeks. So now we see which side is going to make the first move. They've both been talking about it a little bit, but we're already hearing from the Republicans, look, we've also won the House of Representatives back, so that's going to be our bulwark. So now the rubber's going to meet the road. Both sides are going to have to meet in the middle a little bit. You heard the president talking about this in his victory speech, but the proof is in the pudding. How do they actually get to that point of cooperation?
And Jim, you talk about these issues that need to be addressed. The biggest one, of course, is the economy. And with so much disappointment that we've seen recently in the state of the U.S. economy, how was it that President Obama was able to pull through this win?
Well, there were shards of encouragement in the exit polls, people feeling a little bit better about things, but you're right, it's a weak economy. Usually that's bad news for an incumbent. What the Obama campaign did, though, was masterful. They targeted this handful of states we've talked about before that were going to decide the election, and they basically ran the table. They won all the important states. Right. So they have been able to micro-identify their coalition, and that coalition represents this changing demographic face of the United States. Less dependency on white voters, more about African Americans, especially the growing Hispanic population in the United States, even Asian Americans. So the Republican Party has some work to do to catch up with Democrats to keep pace with the changing demographics.
With that said, do you think it's devastating for the party, for the Republican Party right now? And you mentioned about them getting back the House, but they did lose a couple of seats. And how do you think they will move forward?
Well, look, yeah, I think we're going to see a period of introspection. When political parties lose, especially 2 elections in a row, presidential, they want to look at, have they gone too far to the right? All the talk against immigration reform in the Republican primaries, where Mr. Romney had to get onto the right side of everyone, that may have hurt him in the end with Hispanic voters. They voted in huge numbers for President Obama. So that party needs to assess where they're going to head in the future, how they're going to make some changes, what kind of different candidates are they going to attract. Maybe they need to look at someone like Marco Rubio in Florida. And
Jim, with a little bit of time that we have left, in terms of foreign policy, what are we going to see President Obama doing?
Well, look, we have to remember the election was decided on domestic issues, the economy. The foreign policy problems, though, are still there, including the interconnectedness of the economy, the Arab Spring in the Middle East. All these issues are going to present themselves. And, of course, we'll look ahead to the next Secretary of State once Hillary Clinton is replaced, because she says she doesn't want to stay on. So some changes coming in terms of approach, but the main policies probably will stay the same for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. All right, Jim Malone, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights into this exciting race.
Thank you.
Moving on, coming up next, we'll talk to our economics reporter, Millar Sega, about the effects of this election on the global economy. You're watching On Assignment. And we're back, and we're joined now by VOA's Millar Sega for a look at the U.S. election and how its result may affect the global economy.
So, Mill, there was substantial political support overseas for President Obama's reelection.
Yes.
What kind of effect is that going to have economically?
Well, keep in mind, Alex, that this is a status quo election. This is what the rest of the world actually, if they could have voted, this is what they wanted to have seen. They want steady leadership. They want something they know rather than the thing that they don't know. So,
Right.
so in fact, what it is a green light to continue forward with whatever was going on in the global economy right now. Where Obama is concerned, where Europe is concerned, where China is concerned. It is a status quo election. Let's keep moving forward.
And that was President Obama's campaign slogan,
Yes, it was,
forward,
yes.
yes.
And now he's going to stay in the White House. So what do you think are going to be his challenges as far as the global economics are concerned?
Look, it's very important to note that either candidate would have faced very strong headwinds and very big challenges ahead. You're looking at a Europe that seems to be deepening. The recession in Europe appears to be deepening. You've got a China that is facing also a leadership change. And you've got the U.S. facing what could be a very dire fiscal cliff. So these are all issues that either leader would have had to face. They're particularly exacerbated because the U.S. is such a large economy that if anything should happen to the U.S., if the U.S. stumbles in any way economically, so does the rest of the world. And that is a big problem there.
And of course, people, when you're talking about these potential stumbles in the economy, people think about the effect, what effect is this going to have on my pocketbook, on my bank account? What kind of outcome did we see in terms of stocks as a result of this election?
During Election Day, it was relief that finally this is going to be over. And if you stayed up late enough, you would have noticed that the stock futures, U.S. stock futures, before the Wall Street opened, were actually rising. But what happened was early in the morning, the European Union suggested that their forecast had to change, that in fact the recession in the 17-nation Eurozone is likely to be worse. So as a result, what you saw was a tanking stock market. I think the Dow Jones on Wednesday was down as much as 1.5%.
Yeah.
So it's fairly large. I think how it will impact you on the pocketbook issues really depends on how Europe deals with this crisis. They have not asked for help from the U.S. yet. It really will depend. I think a lot of the fear really is about the upcoming fiscal cliff here in the United States, whether or not leaders here can reach some kind of a bipartisan deal to stave off what could be a very deep crisis that could affect the entire world, a recession here in the United States, and if that happens here, it's bound to happen elsewhere.
Okay, quickly in 20 seconds, if I've got stocks, should I be concerned?
I think if you have stock, you should always go for a conservative bet in any case. We should always be concerned anytime you're putting money that you really desperately need to put in your pocket to pay for other things. You need to be very conservative in your investment portfolio. Expect a lot of ups and downs, but I think most economists are quite optimistic that politicians here will reach some kind of a consensus that we cannot afford a fiscal cliff. So hang on to your money, do invest, but invest wisely.
Fantastic.
All right, Mill, thank you so
very
much. Coming up, we're going to take a look at some other elections, this time in Ukraine. You're watching On Assignment.
The elections in the United States are the big news this week, but in Ukraine last month, there was also an important election.
President Viktor Yanukovych will keep a narrow parliamentary majority, but he now faces new parties and younger faces. October's vote has re-energized Ukraine's pro-Western opposition. We talked about it with our VOA man in Moscow, Jim Brook. Now, the fact that President Yanukovych's party came in first in this vote, got the most votes, what kind of effect is this going to have on the country?
His party won 30%, and now I'm hearing the communists may not join an alliance with him, in which case he'll have to cobble together an alliance with many of these independent congressmen. So he's going to have to work hard to put together a simple majority going into the elections, he was hoping to get a 2/3 majority, which would allow him to change the constitution. Now he has to do some homework and work late nights to pull together a parliamentary 50% majority.
In his Soviet youth, Viktor Yanukovych was a street fighter. Now he is 62 years old and Ukraine's president. Vitaly Klitschko is the World's Boxing Council's heavyweight champion. He is 41 years old and represents Ukraine's new political generation. Klitschko and his Udar or Punch Party led the opposition surge in Ukraine, the largest democracy to emerge from the Soviet Union. Ukraine's three opposition parties drew slightly more votes than President Yanukovych's two-party governing alliance. Mr. Yanukovych will keep control of parliament.
And how was the opposition able to gain so much ground in this race?
Good question. The playing field really was tilted against the opposition. Their airtime on TV was restricted. Their meetings were restricted. Some of their candidates were physically attacked. There was a lot of funny business going on. For instance, my name is James Brooke, and if you want to vote for me, there might be 3 James Brookes on the list. One with KS, one with KE, and one with K. And I know people who voted for the wrong candidate because they got mixed up. But the opposition, did well. I think people are pretty fed up with the economic performance.
Ukrainians complain of an economic decade lost to corruption and political paralysis. This year, Ukraine's economy is growing by only 1%. Julia, a 27-year-old office manager, says she and her friends have given up on politics.
Actually, this year, I don't think that everybody will go for voting because people were disappointed with our last elections.
Yet Vyacheslav, a university student, says he will vote for Yulia Tymoshenko's opposition party. But Tymoshenko can't run. She is in jail, serving a 7-year jail term for abuse of office stemming from when she was prime minister.
Yulia Tymoshenko, because I don't like Yanukovych and his party and don't like the politician situation in my country, and I hope that it will be better in the future.
And what's been the international response to this vote?
Well, both the EU and Washington called it a step backward because of all the funny business leading up to the vote, the restriction of the press, the restriction on candidates, restrictions on campaigning. Let's see where it goes. Whether the Europeans actually go as far as sanctions, I'm not sure.
And what about Klitschko? We saw his rise in this election. What can you tell us about him and about his potential even later on down the road for the presidential election?
Well, first of all, he's a big guy.
Vitaly Klitschko stands 2 meters tall and punches so hard they call him Dr. Iron Fist. Now, the World Boxing Council's reigning heavyweight champion is fighting a new battle, Ukraine's parliamentary elections.
We are fighting for what is right. We are fighting for ideas, and they are fighting for money. And that is why I'm confident that we can build a normal state. The Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, and the Georgians could do it. We are Ukrainians, and we can do it too.
Klitschko campaigns against corruption and for close ties with Europe. His party is Udar, Russian for punch.
And he's quite a guy. He's a self-made man. He's very charismatic. People like him. But he also makes sense. He lived in Germany for 10 years, speaks fluent German, and really understands the West. He understands how Poland evolved with Western help, with German help, how Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and he always cites these other Central European countries as models for Ukraine. So he is sincerely pro-West. So you have that complete package, a guy who's smart and has the physical, personal charisma that excites the voters.
And again, we'd like to thank VOA's Jim Brooke, who spoke to us via Skype from Moscow. Now returning to the United States, where Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast in late October with devastating winds and rain. More than 110 Americans were killed in the storm, and it hit hardest in the states of New Jersey and New York.
Journalists were hard-pressed to cover the event as reporting crews and expensive television cameras went into the heavy weather.
Some reporters were not even able to make it into work, but that didn't stop our very own Zulema Palacio from getting pictures of the hurricane in the D.C. area. I talked with her a few days after the big storm. Let's take a look. Where were you when the storm hit?
I was in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., about an hour away driving. And so we are essential personnel, meaning even though the federal government closed, we had to be here. I have a small car, and the idea of driving for 1 hour through the storm was not appealing to me.
Right.
But I live right by the Potomac River and the Occoquan rivers. So it was like, okay, if there is going to be, you know, floodings and all this stuff,
And
I am right
surge,
there.
yeah.
So I convinced the boss that I could work from there. This is all I had, but this has a very powerful camera. So I had just purchased this little thing.
And now what does that do?
This allows you to put the phone in a tripod. So here, let's see, hold on. Here is the camera. You don't want to hold the lens, so you put this thing in here. This is called a bean bag, and it's just full. It can be full of sand or little stones or something, but it also has the purpose of a tripod.
And it's pretty heavy, right? So
it's
it'll
heavy, yes.
be stable.
So here we go, like if it was a tripod. So I can put it right there and put it, and it is all level out. So I just started filming from here, and I went with the car through the storm, filming, and so you get this feeling of the windshield wipers,
Right.
but a very stable shot. I am driving around, and there is not a soul on the roads because it's pouring, it's windy, everybody's saying stay indoors.
Of course.
And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get anything, but I am driving. And I got to the old historic town of Occoquan that has a big bridge next to it. And I thought I'm going to turn around under that bridge. I got there, and there is a fisherman.
Out in the storm.
Fishing out in the storm
Oh, my
under the
goodness.
bridge. And I, wait a second. So I go talk to the guy, and he says, oh, storms are great for fishing. So I start going with my telephone asking him questions, right?
Yeah.
He's from El Salvador, and then we are talking, and then he says, yes, the fishing is good. And as we are talking, he pulls this big catfish,
Wow.
about that big.
And you captured it
And
on
I
video.
captured the whole thing with the video, with this little telephone. And then here he is. And then meanwhile, we are kind of talking, and I am asking his questions, and why are you doing this and what that is pouring.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
And then here comes the
And
fish.
he caught a fish. Oh, wow. That is great timing. And now talking about the storm and its effects here in the Washington area, what were some of the things that you came across?
Well, besides the fisherman,
Right.
so the next day, when in the aftermath of the storm, I went to Old Town Alexandria, also with the telephone right in front of my in my car on the dashboard, so I could get video of the Old Town of Alexandria, which is all along the Potomac River. That it was really high, carrying all sorts of debris and trees and everything.
Right.
And the Old Town often gets flooded. So. But by the moment I got there, the flooding was not significant. That evening, hours later, the flooding was higher. But then I found trees that had fallen right on the houses.
Yeah, that
and I
photo that you took.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I showed you the photo of the tree completely on top of the house and one of the cars of the
Right.
family. And so I got a lot of the trees, some of the flooding by the city, and all with this until this one filled up.
So I wanted to know, what does this say to us in terms of climate change? Seeing these scenes of lower Manhattan underwater, knee-deep water, it's pretty shocking to see.
During this election campaign for presidential in the United States, climate change and environmental issues have not been touched. And finally, basically 6 days before the election, here comes a massive storm to remind them, you know what, you haven't talked about environmental issues and climate change, and I'm going to remind you big time what's coming up.
And our thanks again to Zuli Palacio, who covers environmental issues for VOA. Now, returning to the U.S. presidential election, now that President Obama has won, it's not just Americans who are talking about these results. People all around the world have been reacting.
And one part of the world that you might have thought watched the election most intensely is the Middle East. But as VOA's Elizabeth Arad reported from Cairo just before the vote, many people in Egypt say they see little prospects of change no matter who was going to be in the White House.
People across the Middle East have been roiled by political change for nearly 2 years. So it's perhaps not surprising the U.S. presidential election is failing to garner much interest. Few are expressing a preference for either President Barack Obama or challenger Mitt Romney, even as both make the Middle East a key foreign policy issue. Mr. Romney sees a region in chaos.
We're talking about the Middle East and how to help the Middle East reject the kind of terrorism we're seeing and the rising tide of tumult and confusion.
For some in the Arab world, any talk of help from any U.S. politician comes across as arrogant. Ayman Kamal is a store clerk in Cairo.
It's as if it's a teacher holding a stick to the student, as if Arabs are students in a classroom in front of him. This is all I see from America.
Others fear continued U.S. military interference in the region, despite calls for caution from Mr. Obama.
For us to get more entangled militarily in Syria is a serious step.
And Mr. Romney.
We don't want to have military involvement there. We don't want to get drawn into a military conflict.
Author and political scientist Hassan Nafa says it doesn't matter who wins.
But the intellectuals certainly would prefer Obama rather than Romney because he will be more careful in using force to achieve the U.S. goals and interests.
Assalamu alaikum.
Mr. Obama raised high hopes in 2009, promising a fresh start for the U.S. in the Middle East during a speech in Cairo. But disappointment followed, as did the Arab Spring. For Hassan Nafa, the biggest disappointment was no change in U.S. policy on the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Everybody knows that the United States, whoever is governing this big and important international actor, will be very much supportive to Israel. So as long as the U.S. president doesn't change the current American policy in the Middle East, we will see the United States as playing a negative role in this part of the world, and nothing will be changing.
We will stand with Israel.
Both candidates have pledged full backing of America's longtime ally, and that continued support is a perennial rallying cry for anti-Americanism in the region. Elizabeth Arad, VOA News, Cairo.
And that does it for our show this week. Join us again next time when we'll have even more to tell you on the U.S. presidential election.
And not just that, we'll also check out a beach in California for a story of finding commonality in people of different faiths, but on a surfboard.
You can find this week's episode and its segments at voanews.com or on YouTube and Facebook.
Thanks to our in-studio guests, Jim Malone and Mel Arcega, and to On Assignment team. And thank you to you for watching. We'll catch you next time.